Hello, I'm Nanette George from the marketing team at Anaconda. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. At any time during the event, you're welcome to submit questions in the Q&A window or download content from the resources window. If you'd like to learn more about Anaconda's products and services, you can use the Drift chat window to get directly in touch with an Anaconda business development representative. Be sure to keep an eye on Anaconda's events and webinars page to find out about upcoming events. Now I'm delighted to introduce our speakers. Chris Steidohar is the Director of Product Management for AI at Anaconda. He's the product leader for Anaconda's AI solutions, leading the engineering, implementation, and services teams to enable users to realize value by implementing machine learning, AI, and data science capabilities to take applications into production quickly. Matt Glickman is an industry leader in enterprise data platforms. For over 20 years, he led the development of business-critical analytics platforms at Goldman Sachs. When he joined Snowflake, he launched the Snowflake Data Marketplace. And today, Matt helps lead the financial services business globally and drives customer and product strategy with a focus on generative AI applications. Chris, I'll let you take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. We're very excited to speak with you today about AI in financial services. So the original topic for this webinar, lessons learned from the financial services industry in AI and ML, is incredibly broad, right? So this industry has been using AI and ML for a number of years now. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to focus this particular webinar in on the hottest topic today, which is generative AI, large language models, right? Everyone wants to talk about OpenAI and GPT and whatnot. So we're going to be focusing on that topic for today. All right, so I know we already had some introductions, but I'll do a quick intro. My name is Chris. Really glad to be talking to you today. I'm a director of product management at Anaconda for our AI products. I have a background in ML AI strategy, used to be a software engineer many years ago, and I am in Salt Lake City, Utah. Matt?
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Matt Glickman, a longtime data person, spent the bulk of my career in the financial services industry at Goldman Sachs running quant platforms, came to Snowflake, led product early on, helped launch a data marketplace, helped Snowflake as we decided to specialize by industry. Financial services is our largest customer base. And as Chris mentioned, the world shifted to focus on generative AI, a little over a year ago. I've been helping our most strategic customers and Snowflake internally think about the opportunities for generative AI within this industry. So happy to be here, and I can literally talk about this all night, but hopefully it'll only be for the cutoff that we give us.
All right, thanks, Matt. All right, so I'll give a quick overview of Anaconda in case you haven't heard of us, but of course, everyone has. We are where everyone starts when it comes to data science, AI, machine learning. So anytime a data scientist or practitioner or machine learning engineer wants to jump into a notebook and start coding with Python and start using all the great packages that are out there, PyTorch and whatnot, we're where everyone starts. So we have 40 million users globally, and about 250,000 organizations use Anaconda, which represents about 90% of the Fortune 500. So what we're really focusing on as we move into 2024 is innovation. So folks have been using our products to do amazing things with AI and ML, and we're continuing to build products that let the more technical folks like ML engineers, data scientists, really get the most out of what they're building, right? So GPU support, ML ops, and whatnot. We are, first and foremost, the trusted platform, right? So our package repository is trusted by anyone and everyone doing AI and ML around the world. And we're really focused on value, right? So it's fine to build really cool technical stuff, but in today's world, right, we have to be able to show users and organizations how they can drive value from using our products. All right. And then why Snowflake and Anaconda? Well, this is very straightforward, right? So when I'm talking about machine learning, when I'm talking about artificial intelligence, right, it's really the marriage of data and then some sort of model or some sort of application, right? So there's the data, and then you got to do something with it, right? You got to train a model, you got to, push the data through a model. And so Snowflake and Anaconda together provide all of the capabilities that users and organizations need to get the most out of AI today. All right, now I'm going to throw this over to Matt.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. So as Chris mentioned, a key part of as you go on this journey, particularly as you go on the journey, enabling your business users with the power of generative AI starts with data. And this is where we're seeing many of our customers who have already trusted us and made investments in their consolidating their data platform, having a coherent data strategy, can now actually get returns out of that by adding generative AI on top of that. But you really, to get that coherency, you really need to be starting with a coherent data strategy, and hence the platform that we've brought to market over the years is how can we make a data platform for a variety of workloads just work. We've taken a very different approach to how you do this, right? This is not about, we want to free our customers up from having to do the machinery and focus on a platform that just works across data warehouse workloads, engineering workloads, AI, ML workloads, applications, all within a coherent platform that not only works to break down silos within an organization, but allows our customers to connect to their greater ecosystems all across what we call the Snowflake Data Cloud, which is effectively a global system that all of our customers are connected to and have optionality to connect to one another, all within this global interconnected multi-cloud platform. Each one of our customers running this platform within their virtual four walls. Next slide, Chris. And it builds on there. So what we've basically done is we've, together with our partners in the data provider space, solutions, service providers, and the greater ecosystem, have gone to market with this greater ecosystem where they are bringing their solutions and their data sets to market with us, so that instead of having to have our customers thinking about how to build out a asset management platform on raw data that they have in Snowflake, they can start with an Aladdin. They can start with a State Street Alpha that is built on top of Snowflake, that is leveraging the platform and delivered to them on this network. Same thing goes with our service provider partners, ecosystem provider partners. And this growing ecosystem is not just a partner network, but it's everyone actually running their pieces of their platform in this interconnected way. And we'll talk about this, the yield that this provides in the Gen AI space, because now you're not only bringing your data, you're bringing your data and your vendor data, your market data, your solutions all into this AI arena, which really gives you a much higher starting point. Next slide. Keep going, I think. Right, and then so how we've added AI into this picture, and we'll talk about this throughout the session here. But we've decided to take a very different approach to how we can help all of our customers get to market faster with Gen AI. Right, this is a quickly evolving space, a space that involves a lot of to go from scratch, a lot of R&D, a lot of engineering, a lot of specialized hardware and sophistication. We are bringing serverless offerings of LLMs that you can host within Snowflake out of the box. So instead of having, which all the way to the ability to do, your own homegrown LLMs that you can run as well, but allowing customers to get started in seconds with an LLM that can be hosted in what we call our Cortex serverless offering, to be able to build applications on those serverless offerings, to then be able to build and customize and fine tune models all within the protected perimeter within of the Snowflake platform, to really make it so that, to Chris's earlier point, how quickly can you get to value? How quickly can you do that in a trustful way, but all leveraging the governance that our customers, particularly in financial services, have come to not only expect, but demand. Next slide. And some of the key use cases, right, that this is kicking off, and this, I think every one of our customers has their, never-ending list of all the cases that they want to bring generative AI to market with. But I think, three buckets that we see a lot of. The first one is, I think the one that everyone kind of starts with is, how can I have a co-pilot who understands my data and understands my business and can navigate and help my business users who are not necessarily as deep in understanding how to write Python code, though many more do these days, or understanding how to write SQL code, as well as my technical users who may not understand all the complexities of my business. How can I give everyone one of these assistants that they can interrogate and bring that sophistication to all my business users? The second one is, and this is something that has gone on in financial services for decades, is the learning curve to get up to speed to be productive in a bank, in a hedge fund, is enormously steep. So much so that people stay in this industry longer than any other industry I've experienced, just because it takes so long to ramp. By the time you reach that level, you're so valuable. You're never going to be. Recreating that is hard, and it's so valuable for the company to maintain those employees. So helping ramp so that people can come out in the door and quickly ramp is a great opportunity for AI and having that assistance. And the third, and maybe the most obvious, is just taking away a lot of the human labor in document analysis and summarization, and just such a sweet spot for large language models, and to be able to bring that automation to the table. So, I mean, there's many more, but I think those are three common buckets that we see.
Great.
Next slide.
Well,
yeah.
What a great segue into our
Awesome.
first topic for today, which is what we wanted to do first is we wanted to dig into what are the use cases, right, within the financial services industry, and where can these organizations use generative AI to really realize value. So the first one that you mentioned, which is the Copilot and like the analysis Copilot, most of the Copilots that we've seen launched today have been either conversational in nature, right? So maybe I'm asking it a question, then I'm asking a follow-up question, then I'm asking the assistant to summarize some information or something like that. But then one that's really emerged within the last year has been the coding assistant as well. And so because code, like, Python code, or back in my day, C++ code is just a language. And so large language models can actually understand, well, I don't want to say that they're perfect at it yet, because there are some studies out there that have expressed various degrees of efficacy with the coding copilots. But because writing software is just speaking in a language, right? But instead of English, I'm speaking C++ or I'm speaking Python. That's a great application for LLMs. Now, when you talk about LLMs for data analysis, Matt,
so just before we jump, because I think that's a great kind of starting point, is the coding one, because I think this is one that I think is almost taken on a life of its own for two reasons. One is, and I've actually talked to several large banks about this, the efficiency gain from improving coding, coding speed and just how quickly developer and making even a small improvement to developer productivity is such a large return on investment, given particularly in financial services who are heavy in the developer community, both for new development, but also kind of legacy support and kind of maintenance and is extraordinary. And while maybe seem not as sexy, to the folks like, myself in the data world, is an amazing is an amazing use case. And I think is kind of becoming a runaway kind of win. And I don't know about you, but I've become like a master level Python programmer just because I have this AI at my disposal that is, I can't even go back to the world of having to Google for things and try to, number one, I think it's also self-fulfilling, right? Because particularly in the Python world, right, where the people who are using these models are so much, a lot of their coding happens to be in Python. You're seeing this kind of, I'm not saying it's going to be as, kind of off the charts, for COBOL, but for anyone doing anything with Python and anyone doing anything with Python to then do data analysis, which is, is to me, like, if you're not doing that today, sure, could it hallucinate something? Maybe. And that's, why the human is still in the loop. But the productivity gains, and I think when you think about like the, what is going to be the kind of the early wins, no question, right, that coding is a huge one. And, it's just going to get better and better because of just, how much, that's becoming a hot use case.
Yeah, and that's a great point. We actually launched here at Anaconda last year. We launched the first version of the Anaconda Assistant, which is a coding assistant that sits right beside your notebook. Like as you're writing Python code. And gosh, I've been writing Python code for years, but I can't even tell you how much faster I can do what I need to do having a coding assistant that is actually contextually aware of what I'm doing, right? So it knows what data frames I'm working with.
And explaining what you're trying to do, right? Again, if everyone on the phone here, if you don't walk away with anything else, if you don't try to ask, and again, go to GPT-4 and try asking it to write, some Python snippet of something you're thinking. And not only once, but like this kind of interrogation and like, no, I didn't mean that. I mean, like, focus on like this kind of conversational approach to programming. And again, a lot of these kind of IDEs kind of incorporate this. But I think like that to me is, and you described it well, Chris, like it's thinking about it as a language. I mean, one of the breakthroughs for me and my kind of mental model on how this technology worked was when GPT-4 first came out, I asked it like, what were the 3 languages that it was most proficient in? Without coaxing, right? And it described as 3 languages it was most proficient in as English, Python, and I think maybe Mandarin, right? So it made the jump. That those were the kind of things that it saw that these languages were the same, and then I kind of prompted to say, hey, well, what about SQL, right? And I say, well, and a very thoughtful response was SQL is a domain-specific language, not something that I can think about it as broadly as what I can express in an English or Python or other kind of natural language. But like it had made that jump on its own with its prompting, with its training, whatever. But I think that's the way to think about coding when it comes to these models.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you mentioned about the financial.
No, sorry. The third one wasn't Mandarin. The third one was math.
Whoa.
So English, Python, and math were the 3 languages that was most proficient in, which I thought was even more profound.
Which is really, really, and this is a whole other webinar, but it's really interesting because one of the areas where ChatGPT gets beaten up the most is in mathematics. So I think that it's really interesting that it would self-proclaim.
Yeah, and particularly, and again, we'll talk about this. And I think, one of the things where I think there still is this, in some ways, this divergence on, there are models and there are models. There are AI models that are, that are sounding like they're speaking, language that we can comprehend. And then there's something else that is reasoning. And to me, one of the breakthroughs, and talk about math, one of the breakthroughs, and I think I watched this happen when this was rolled out, when they basically taught, GPT-4 particularly, and I think they, incorporated this into the lower models, where they taught it to don't try to just figure that out in your head. Delegate that to a code interpreter as a tool that GPT has on the side, that it can now run math as Python code, that it can run and understand when to use that when the question is related to something that is a numerical computation. Profound. I mean, I don't even know how to explain that to a person on that distinction, right? Because we do it, but sometimes you're not gonna do a long division in your head. You're gonna say, oh crap, I gotta write that down, because that's right. That's the jump that's been made. This is the kind of things that I think are, if you haven't experienced it, right? Watching, and again, another thing to try is try to ask it, and it now tells you when you're using ChatGPT, it'll tell you that it's actually spinning up a code interpreter to figure that out. When it does that, is probably the most interesting next step of tool usage. The first one happening to be, again, self-fulfilling, an internal Python interpreter that it has to use as a tool, instead of basically trying to just do this by memorization.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, we've in the conversations I have with my colleagues about the future of Gen AI and LLMs, it's not actually bigger, better LLMs. We think that it's a cluster of models and models talking to models, right? So what a great example, right, of ChatGPT actually going and talking to another system or to another model, because
yep.
Models are still this idea of generalized intelligence just really isn't there yet. So we can train models that are really good at math, or we can train models that are really good at tabular data, right? But it's difficult to have a model that's good at everything. So yeah, we really think that as this develops and that as organizations start to get more comfortable with using LLMs and Gen AI, that they're actually going to be implementing, a cluster of models to do all that.
Or a cluster of tools to plug into models. And I would, just to kind of give us a little bit more kind of here and now to this, I don't think this is the future that we're talking about. This is happening now, right? In the pace that this stuff is moving. I'm at a point now where, I feel like we're the limiting factor on this next generation of models, where it has way more capability than we realize. Talk about this tool usage example, right? Right. You can now, with these state-of-the-art models, you can plug in your own set of tools, and you can describe to the AI, for example, use this tool to browse the internet, use this tool to generate a visualization, and have the tool basically, describe that. Okay, if you give me, use this tool to query a database, and basically, if you pass in some SQL, I'll give you back the results from that query, right? And that's it. That is the configuration to explain to an AI how it can use the tool. And the code interpreter example, right? I know this for a fact, but I'm pretty sure it kind of works give me some Python code. I will execute that Python code and give you the result. Or I'll give you an error if your code has a syntax error. And that is just understandable by the AI. That still blows my mind that's level. So I'm not saying we're there, but we are so much further along than most people realize, particularly in this reasoning power that is available. And I think that is the thing that I think, getting when you think about, a business user who's going to want to face off to an AI, I think there's two kind of, things that need to be kind of incorporated that I think we're all underestimating on how good it has to be, but also how far along we've come. It has to generally be, more intelligent than, we think, right? And the state of the art is way farther along than people realize. But I think the second thing, and this is where I think, this is where it becomes almost an art form, is the tone it takes engaging with people, right? If you think about, I think about this a lot, maybe too much, but like when you talk to, there are certain people you like to talk to, like Chris seems like a good guy that I would want to hang out with because he just has like a persona that I kind of engaging, right? And there's other people, I'm not going to name names on a recorded webinar, who are not as engaging as humans to engage. Maybe, I don't, no judgment, maybe even smarter, right? But I'm still not going to engage with them. I think that balance of intelligence and kind of the EQ or it kind of the kind of persona are going to be both critical as these AIs get deployed. You'll be able to kind of set the tone, and maybe some organizations will want to have friendlier AIs than others, or different kind of embracing the culture of an organization. But both are going to be important. And I think we're seeing this play out already in the marketplace, where some people are kind of trading off safety for persona. Maybe some are taking this too far extreme and want to make it, where they, the AIs can get raunchy. Maybe that's too extreme. But I think that's where I think you're seeing both these things develop in real time, super fast. And like, this is this year, development. This is not like years in the future. And it's developing at a pace I've never seen anything like in my experience.
Yeah, and it's the with respect to financial services, some people that when I mention it, like the large finance organizations that I've worked with have some of the largest and most sophisticated software engineering groups. They kind of cock their heads and they're like, well, wait, but that's a bank or that's an insurance company. I'm like, no. This is the place where a lot of technical innovation is happening, and where a lot of the engineering and the technical horsepower is going. And so using AI to help accelerate that is a fantastic use case, for the financial services industry.
And the complexity in this industry is also ripe for it, right? Because again, we talked about the ramp. We talked about just inherently how complex the data models are, how complex, just the machinations of how the ecosystem works, right? I mean, again, this is a complex industry. The good news is that it's written about a lot. And, if anyone is thinking that you have to kind of, train your own model to teach it about finance, you need to try this out.
Right.
There's common knowledge that is way deeper about how this industry works, how the data models of this industry, the kind of how, the complexity of these financial instruments to everything, I mean, again, is it every nuance? No, but it's way more tackled. That's number one, the complexity. The second thing is the amount of human labor that is currently goes into keeping this industry to operate is enormous, right? There's an enormous amount of human horsepower. I'm not saying replacing humans, right? I'm saying like that can be uplifted by not having to read long form documents, while you're talking to a customer, or being distracted from a customer conversation because you're trying to kind of, read, summaries of what your customer has been interested before. Like, I think this use case of, for example, call centers, which are a huge human capital expense for banking, for insurance, many other industries, is a massive opportunity. And it's probably top a list of many people who are listening here today. Just because, think about someone on a call center, they get, someone who probably has some issue and is pretty irate about it. right? And they get routed to a call center rep who has to quickly scramble and figure out what is either A, have to ask all the questions again, or B, quickly try to ingest what are the things that they've been calling about, what are the activity they've had, what is the kind of, what are relevant things that other customers like them are talking about. Pretty stressful kind of setup, superhuman, capital intensive, and so ripe for, again, we talked about developer productivity, huge. But another one that's like, if you can have any yield in improving their productivity so that A, they're spending less time, B, the customer satisfaction could go up even a little bit, we're talking massive returns. And it's also very ripe into what the capability can be done now. The complexity of like a complex co-pilot that understands everything about industry, sure. I mean, that's coming too, but like this ability to kind of, narrow the aperture of what these kind of people who are the first ones to kind of respond to their valuable customers who are calling in some kind of duress or concerns or something, and say like, hey, glad, happy to help you. I see that you're having this problem with this, and I see that you've been kind of shopping around for, that. Now here's something that, do I have their summary correct? You're like, yeah, that's pretty spot on. Good, because versus like today, and we've all this experience. I'm like, yes, this is who I am. Yeah, this is I can validate who I am. Okay, great. This is what, what I'm shopping for. This is what, let me remind you the business that I've had with you for the past 25 years, right? Before I can even get to the point of what we're talking about here. Massive opportunity in that space, in that kind of, that call center that, again, has this so much, value impact that can be unlocked.
Yeah, and speaking of all this data, I did want to, touch on our second, lesson topic, which is really around the data strategy. I think that companies are very interested in figuring out how they can leverage AI with their data, right? With their proprietary, with their IP, and have AI use that data to help the organization perform better. Like you said, having an AI model that understands, all of the training materials that you need, or, tens of thousands of pages of customer service documentation that it can crawl through, and it can help a customer service rep, right? So, just do you have any thoughts on, within the financial services industry, how they can safely leverage generative AI without necessarily exposing all of their proprietary data to the internet or to a public model?
No, I have no answer. No, I'm kidding. Of course, this would be like near and dear to my heart if I don't. So yes, I think this is, again, both self-serving, but I think probably the most important lesson that I think we're seeing enterprises all come to is that, an AI strategy, or particularly a Gen AI strategy, built without having, a data strategy underneath it, is just destined to fail, right? And conversely, the investments that have been made to get a more coherent data strategy, the return that you can get now, an accelerated return you can get by putting Gen AI on top of that, is massive. And just, as an example, like if you think about it, and I've seen this now, where it's like, doesn't matter where your data is, doesn't matter what shape it is, it can be a mess, AI will figure it out. Sure, in infinite time and infinite resources, sure, right? You have an intelligent being that now you can direct at, any kind of problems, right? But the same way that you don't want to waste every one of your business users having to do that wrangling and wrestling and spelunking to try to find and navigate data and putting it all together every time they have to, do an analysis, right? That's why you invest in a data strategy. So you do that ideally once, and now each person has incremental, has only does incremental work to now just much quicker returns. Think about that, magnified, where now if you say the AI, and again, if you haven't tried this, I recommend it. Tell AI, like, I have all my data in one place. I want to do this analysis. It's going to fly, right? And it's because it just makes sense. It's like, God, that's great, right? And we've done this. I mean, and again, I don't know why. Maybe you have, maybe it's obvious. Maybe you have friends and who are building some of these models, but you tell these models, like, I have all my data in Snowflake. This is, what I'm trying to figure out. It'll know how to look for it. It'll basically understand roles. It'll understand how to put it together. It'll ask you kind of questions on how to, what the semantic model is, the things that it doesn't understand, right? But now you're getting yield, right? And now you have a way where you can basically accelerate your adoption because you made that investment in your data strategy. So what we're seeing now is that people who made an investment are seeing great returns. The people who are kind of putting it off, they're like, shit, this is a time now where I should now double down and accelerate, because now I have not only my end customers, but now I have an AI persona who's going to be my power user, who's going to now help me get value quicker because I made that investment. And the proof is in the pudding. Like, that's happening. Again, if you asked me a year and a half ago, was that going to be the big driver of people making this investment data? Absolutely not. Right? I mean, anyone tells you that is maybe lying is probably too strong, but probably is rewriting history. But that's the world we're in, and it's again, same way of like, it's self-fulfilling, right? Of why the coding systems are getting better and better, particularly with Python. These AIs are getting better and better with data because they're finding that people are making these data investments, and because they made those data investments, it's paying off. And you're getting the point where those AIs are getting better and better and helping you answer questions on your data because you had a coherent strategy.
Yeah. We, in working with users and working with organizations that are building and training, very complex models, including LLMs. And then also, when I work with organizations that want to, maybe use an open source model like a Falcon or a Mistral, and they want to tune it for their use, man, I'll tell you, if the data that they want to use for training, retraining, for the tuning, if that's in Snowflake, that makes everyone's lives so much easier. And just the performance gains, knowing that it's secure, right? Knowing that the data is safe, knowing that you're not exposing your data, to anything outside of the organization. I will say that we've had a lot of very, very, just some great success stories, right? When the organization that we're working with has their data in Snowflake, because like you said, you have the tools, you have the performance, you have the security to do all of the advanced AI, operations that you're looking for.
And the security point you mentioned is a big one, right? Because I think the AIs will naturally, if given access to data, right, will try to, understand it, right, consume it, and create effectively a world model or a mental model on what this data means. And then my thesis is it's going to be impossible if you ask the AI after it's ingested and tried to and learned about that data to not or to unlearn it for a particular user who doesn't have access to that data. Think about when I ask you a question, Chris, about something that maybe you learned over the past weeks, months, years, and I'm like, don't incorporate that piece of knowledge and anything that was derived from it when you answer this question, because the person we're talking to doesn't have shouldn't have been exposed to that. Good luck. Right? No one's our brains don't think that way. AIs don't think that way. However, if you're basically saying to the AI, like, I want you to memorize this. I want you to use an access to a database that is going to enforce permissions appropriately for the user you're talking to. It understands that, right? And now you're basically not only grounded in truth, but you've solved this what could become a very hairy, complex access control problem, because you're trying to kind of create this super being that has all knowledge, and then asking it to kind of selectively forget things versus doing what a person would do, which is like, I'm just going to have my data enforced at the data level. and I'm going to ask questions, and either I'll have access to it or I won't. And then I'll be able to draw conclusions based on what I have access to. That to me, that marriage of the smart reasoning AI with the kind of properly controlled, access to my data, creates really the right way for AI to lift us all up, as opposed to having us, kind of unlearn things, on demand.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are at time. This I could literally I could talk all day and all night about this.
I told you I would.
But yeah, we're definitely looking forward to some Q&A. And then of course, looking forward to continuing this conversation outside of the webinar. We always love talking to folks that are doing this in the industry, showing questions about AI practices, strategies, things like that. I'm always talking to folks across all sorts of industries and all sorts of organizations about AI. And so, yeah, so we'll look forward to that. And again, Matt, thank you so much for joining. And yeah, we'll see everyone out on the internet then.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you so much, Chris and Matt. That was a great discussion. We've had some questions come in, and our first question is from Johnny, who asks, there are lots of coding assistants that offer useful advice for Python and R, but what are good choices for SQL that are known by my database schema?
Great question that Johnny kicks off. Something that Snowflake we're taking pretty seriously. It's funny that generating SQL is one of those things that I think everyone sort of stumbled upon of like, well, obviously this should be a cool use case for this technology. And it's something short answer is Snowflake is investing in this space as well, trying to basically bring something that actually works well in this space. I think there is no one has yet cracked this well. And I think the main reason is that there's a piece of the puzzle missing which you really need to be successful in having AI generate queries that are going to work. And that's the semantic of your data. That's really the current space that everyone's trying to wrangle with, is how do you kind of add an input of a semantic understanding of data as part of the question that as part of the prompt that you're asking, either having that be extracted out of other tools or other semantic model tools. So again, we're investing here, a few other people investing in this space. Stay tuned. But just if you start to do this on your own, you realize it's not as performing as well as you thought, because it actually is probably one of the harder Gen AI problems to solve. But stay tuned for some big developments in the space.
Right. Our second question comes from Sarah. What are key performance indicators or KPIs that we should consider to measure the success of our Gen AI projects?
We're getting some hard questions here. This is a good group. I don't know. Let me give an answer. Maybe, Chris, you have a better one. But I think this is where a lot of confusion is in the market with these benchmarks that are trying to evaluate these different models, and with some kind of pre-canned tests, and which are, I'd argue, really aren't testing the real meat of the matter, and if anything, are soon becoming further training material for when these models get retrained, and so becoming even less real. But I think the real ROI is business impact, which I understand is going to be not as easily measurable as a kind of a indicator and as prescriptive. But that really is what should be driving these rollouts, is what is going to be the business impact that you want for people to be more efficient? Less about how well did it answer these set of questions or how well did it kind of unlock this use case. It's more of how well is it providing value to people to make them more efficient. I don't know, Chris, do you have hopefully a better answer than that?
Yeah, that's that's the thing, because I think that the wrinkle with Gen AI is how do we actually measure the business impact this is having, right? So, for example, in Anaconda we have a Python coding assistant, and to figure out if it's being effective, do we look at how many questions it's being asked, how many answers it's providing, how many errors it's throwing, right? The accuracy. So I really think that you have to start with, and it's the age-old thing where you have to start with the problem, start with the goal in mind. Okay, I want to improve, I don't know, the efficiency of my Python developers, and now I have to figure out a way to actually measure that, right? So I think that the hardest part is really finding that metric, or finding the way to measure and figure out what success looks like. So it really does, like Matt said, it just goes back to business impact, right? So like, what is the business impact that I'm trying to have? Am I trying to increase sales? Am I trying to, I don't know, decrease average call time for customer service reps? So start with that in mind and then work backwards. Yeah, that's what I would have to say about it.
Great. Awesome. All right. Our third question comes from Jake, who asks, what are some key criteria and considerations when we are evaluating solutions and platforms that we plan to use for our Gen AI projects?
This is maybe an easier one, or at least I'm going to take it as an easier question since I think we're due. But I think, and this is the point that I think we made earlier, I made earlier, I think I dragged Chris along with me on this, is that platforms that incorporate a sound data strategy for a Gen AI will be a successful Gen AI strategy. I think the biggest mistake that we're seeing, again, obviously why we partner here together, right? It's sure, can I get started with Python, quicker, without a kind of rationalized Anaconda environment? Sure. Am I going to get myself into trouble quickly? Obviously, right? I think the same thing goes here, right? Is like, if you're not going to build upon these investments you've made to kind of have a rationalized development environment, a rationalized data environment to basically apply your Gen AI workloads on top of, you may get some cool demos. It will fail. And the worst part about it is it's going to fail spectacularly, because you will have set the bar super high in what's possible. And you're going to trip and fall, and everyone is it's going to be very, very, kind of vocal about that. So I think that's what it really means, is that don't look for shortcuts. Basically, Gen AI should be the accelerator of the returns you get from a rationalized development environment strategy, a rationalized data strategy. That's where AI shines, and that's where you're going to get to production.
Could you restate the question for me, Nanette, just to make sure that I'm answering it accurately?
You bet. What are some of the key criteria and considerations when we're evaluating solutions and platforms we plan to use for our Gen AI projects?
Right. It's, yeah, the easy one is, well, what people call accuracy, but it all depends on the way that you're measuring accuracy, right? Because some Gen AI capabilities, are really good at some things and, not so great at others. So I would definitely have your specific use case in mind, or like your specific application in mind. The other thing, though, that I like to think about is, is this something that I can use as a, software as a service or as like a public cloud offering, like a ChatGPT? Or is this something that for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe my systems are air gapped, or, my company isn't comfortable with me sending information over the wire, to potentially look at serving something. I don't know, let's say I have all my data in a Snowflake database and I don't want to expose that to the internet. So maybe I need to look at having an LLM, maybe not that I built, but that I've gotten from an open source provider, to have that be within my private cloud on premise. So I think that the whole, data privacy aspect, that's another one. But yeah, it's really accuracy. It's really like looking at the use case and saying, is this the best LLM for what I'm trying to do?
Great, terrific. And our last question comes from Leah, who asks, what emerging trends in Gen AI should we be aware of to stay competitive and innovative over the next 5 years?
5 years. Wow. 5 years.
I can't predict the next.
I mean, the singularity is going to happen before 5 years. For God's sake. But let's put that Terminator, killing us all aside. Much shorter time. So the first thing is that be much more aligned to the time frames that are going to unfold in months. But so I'll answer in months, and then you can extrapolate from there, and then maybe Chris can be more thoughtful what is going to happen beyond that. But to me, and I think we touched on it, but one of the significant, probably underappreciated capabilities of Gen AI and the state-of-the-art models is their ability. I think this sort of under the umbrella of agents, but even that's minimizing it. Is these AI's ability to call functions or use tools. I mean, and again, I'm gonna be overly dramatic here, but just bear with me for a second. And think about what were the significant kind of moments where human beings kind of took our major steps forward, right? One is discovering fire. I forget what the analogy there is but one point we figured out how to make and use tools. And that's sort of when we basically kind of accelerated to modern humans. Again, I know that's very dramatic, but to me, what I'm seeing in the AI is to understand that you provided a tool to do something, and it understands how to use that tool to give itself more context, not just you throwing RAG context into these prompts, but AI saying like, that seems like a time-oriented question. I probably need to reach out to the internet to get more relevant news, and does so and gets that output. AI's calling functions, I think, will be one of the big moments that will be on that kind of singularity hockey stick that either kind of leads to massive prosperity or the robots taking over or whatever. And if anything, the robots will send things into the past to try to stop Sam Altman from going back to OpenAI, which of course actually happened. But yeah, so I think that function calling, I think, is probably a huge thing. And if you haven't tried it out, GPT-4 does it very, very well today, and GPT-4 Turbo does it even better. It's for those on the phone. I mean, try that out. It is a remarkable next step that all the AI models are now going to follow, and it's a massive, massive update.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm usually the one that's first with the Skynet, the Skynet references.
Egypt.
Yeah. 5 years? I don't know. Start looking for for John Connor or whatnot. I think the most interesting trend for me to watch isn't actually AGI, which is what everyone's so excited about. but I think it's the proliferation of not like the big models getting better at stuff, but what I think is going to start happening is we're going to start having these big clusters of Gen AI models, right, that are maybe wrapped into a single system, right? But like you said, it's models calling models. And because I think that as trying to train a single model that does everything isn't really I don't think it's the most efficient way to go. So I think that especially this year, we're probably going to see a ton of more purpose-built models coming out that can either interact with each other or with some kind of controller, so that the Gen AI system can get really good at doing a bunch of different stuff. But yeah, I don't know.
I think I'm going to use Chris's example as my like humans discovering fire, as that moment is that the AI is engaging with one another. That's the other thing, and we were talking about this off camera, but like I had the experience recently where I inadvertently had two AIs start to talk to one another, and it's if you can set that up, I highly recommend try that out. I think you'll soon realize what Chris is alluding to is if anything, we're the limiting factor in some of these scenarios right now. It is like, yes, they know how to talk to us, but they know how to talk to one another. And to Chris's point, if you have different ones with different kind of specialized skills, right? There's no, one human being, or maybe Chris is an exception, but normally one human being doesn't have all the knowledge and all the skills to kind of do everything, right? We all have different skills, and we as human beings work together, right, to run a business. Why wouldn't you do the same thing with AI? Why do you think you're going to have one AI that's going to have all the knowledge, all the skills, and all the capabilities? Right? Why not just have 10 of them, 100 of them, right, with its own skills working together? Right? But yeah, this stuff is so much closer than we all realize, and yeah, it's an exciting time.
Awesome. We've had one more question come in, and I want to see if we have time to answer that from Noel, who says, given the complexity of generative AI models, how can financial institutions ensure explainability and interpretability in their decision-making processes? Yeah.
Someone's got to sitting next to them.
Yeah, this is a great question, and I think this is something that is going to shape the direction for AI, Gen AI in general. FinServ is going to maybe set the tone here, because explainability is everything. And so my earlier point about tool calling, I think, is critical here, right? Because in addition to the kind of the power that this is, we can marvel at AI is using tools to come up with answers instead of just, picking out at a clear blue sky, or kind of extracting out of RAG context. For explainability, like, this is what you want. I don't want an AI just give me a number of 5. Right? I want to say, like, there was 5. And this is how I came up with it. I first accessed this database, and then I got this data. And then I analyzed it, and then I realized, and then I reached out to this news website, and I basically figured out what was the latest thing going on with, in euro versus yen, and figured out that this is based on new policy that's coming out. I read this, like, those kind of steps of, like, should a human beings, when if I ask Annette, like, how do you come up with the reason, to do this webinar? You're going to say, like, well, I first did this research, and then I came up with this idea, and then I talked to Chris, and then we we don't kind of just come up with it. We explain it. And I have no idea what are the neurons firing in Annette's brain that made her kind of decide to make that decision, right? She basically recalls what she observed in what process and what tools she used. Like, that's how explainability is going to happen, right? Sure. I mean, Altman was asked this question, like, yes, we'll be able to kind of literally look at the nets and see which weights are firing. Maybe that's interesting. I don't think so. I think they'll be more academic, right? It's going to be like AIs will explain what they did, because we've geared them to now don't just guess, come up with, use these tools I provided, be ready to explain what you did. full explainability. You understand why, and it'll explain why did I decide to use that tool? Well, because this was a temporal question, I thought, right? Will it make mistakes? Sure, it's make mistakes. So do human beings make mistakes, right? That to me is going to be where explainability comes from. Not that we're going to basically kind of look at node firing and what weights flipped. We're going to ask for explainability like we ask people for explainability, not different.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. With Gen AI, it is unlikely that we're training our own model, right? Unless we have a horde of data scientists and a warehouse full of NVIDIA A100s. And so classic explainability is just something that's not, I think that it's gonna, that the requirements for explainability that we had in the past in terms of like, okay, what data did I train this on? Did I retrain this on? Things like that. Yeah, that's going to go away, and it's going to be more, like you said, Matt, more of a human way of explaining what it is.
All right. Well, I want to thank both of you, Matt and Chris, for joining us today. I'm Nanette George with Anaconda. Thanks to all of you who joined the webinar today. Really appreciate you being here, and I'm going to close it out. We'll see you at the next event.
Thanks, guys.
See you later.